The great hall of the Crystal Palace had never felt so cold, despite the hundreds of courtiers packed within its glittering walls. Princess Zara Voss stood at the center of the marble floor, her chin raised defiantly as whispers echoed around, her like autumn leaves in a bitter wind. The ornate crown that had rested upon her auburn hair since her 16th birthday felt impossibly heavy now, though she knew it would not remain there much longer. Princess Zara of House Voss, the court chancellor's voice boomed across the vast chamber, his words formal and cutting. You stand accused of willful disobedience to the crown, rejection of your sacred duties, and bringing shame upon the ancient bloodline of our realm. Zara's green eyes found her mother's face among the elevated thrones. Queen Morgana sat rigid upon the starlight throne, her expression carved from ice. The woman who had once braided Zara's hair and sung her lullabies now looked upon her only daughter as if she were a stranger or worse, a disappointment too great to bear. The charge, continued the chancellor, stems from your repeated and absolute refusal to accept the marriage proposal of Prince Aldrich of the Northern Kingdoms, a union that would secure peace between our realms and strengthen our position against the growing threats from the eastern wastes. A murmur rippled through the assembled nobles. Zara had rejected the proposal 3 times, each refusal more final than the last. Prince Aldrich was a decent enough man, she supposed, but their conversations had been stilted affairs filled with discussions of trade agreements and military positioning. When he looked at her, she saw calculation in his eyes, not affection. When he spoke of their future, it was in terms of duty and political advantage, never love or partnership. Furthermore, the chancellor's voice rose. You have been witnessed consorting with commoners, involving yourself in matters beneath your station, and speaking publicly against the established order of our court. That accusation stung less. Zara had indeed spent time among the merchants and craftspeople of the lower city. She had listened to their concerns about rising taxes and dwindling opportunities. She had seen how the nobles' decisions affected real lives, real families. The court's insular world of politics and positioning felt hollow compared to the genuine struggles and joy she had witnessed beyond the palace walls. How do you answer these charges? Princess Zara straightened her shoulders, her voice carrying clearly across the hushed hall. I answer that I am guilty of choosing my heart over political convenience, guilty of believing that a princess's duty extends beyond securing advantageous marriages to actually caring for her people, and guilty of refusing to live my life as a chess piece in someone else's game. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Several noble ladies clutched their pearls while the men's faces darkened with disapproval. Only a few faces showed anything resembling sympathy, mostly among the younger courtiers who had grown up alongside Zara. Queen Morgana rose slowly from her throne, the crown jewels catching the light like captured stars. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but Zara could hear the slight tremor that betrayed her mother's inner turmoil. Zara, my daughter, you have always been spirited. As a child, this brought joy to our court. But you are no longer a child. A princess cannot simply follow her heart when the welfare of thousands depends upon her choices. Prince Aldrich offers not just marriage, but protection for our people. Without this alliance, we find other ways, Zara interrupted, causing another wave of shocked murmurs. Mother, I've seen what our people face. They don't need another political marriage. They need leaders who understand their struggles, who will fight for their prosperity rather than simply trading them like commodities. The queen's face hardened. You speak of things you do not understand. The burden of rule requires sacrifices. I have made them. My mother made them. It is your turn to do the same. No. The word fell into the silence like a stone into still water. I will not sacrifice my life, my happiness, and my beliefs for a crown that seems to bring nothing but coldness and compromise. Queen Morgana closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, they were filled with a sadness that cut deeper than any anger could have. Then you force my hand. Daughter, the ritual was ancient and terrible in its finality. Zara knelt, as tradition demanded, while the chancellor approached with a silver blade. The jeweled circlet was lifted from her head with ceremonial solemnity, then placed upon a velvet cushion as if it were a sacred relic rather than the symbol of a life she was abandoning by the power vested in the crown of the southern realms. Queen Morgana's voice cracked slightly. "I hereby strip you of all titles, privileges, and claims to inheritance. You are no longer Princess Zara of House Voss. You are exiled from this court and forbidden from using the family name. You have until sunset to leave the palace grounds." The words hit Zara like physical blows, but she refused to let tears fall. She rose gracefully, curtsied once to the throne, and walked toward the great doors. Her footsteps echoed in the stunned silence, each one carrying her further from the only life she had ever known. As she reached the threshold, she turned back. Once, her mother sat slumped on the throne, suddenly looking far older than her years. Their eyes met across the vast hall, and Zara saw regret warring with duty in the queen's gaze. "I love you, mother," Zara said softly. Her words meant for Queen Morgana alone, but carrying in the acoustic perfection of the great hall. "I hope someday you'll understand." Then she walked through the doors, leaving her crown, her name, and her past behind. The sunset was still hours away, but her new life had already begun. Retrieu. The rain fell in steady sheets across the cobblestones of Millbrook, a border town where the elegant architecture of the southern realms gave way to the rougher, more practical buildings of the contested territories. Zara pulled her thin cloak tighter round her shoulders as she hurried through the muddy streets, her stomach cramping from hunger. 3 weeks had passed since her exile, and each day had been a harsh lesson in survival. The Sleeping Griffin Tavern squatted like a tired old dog at the corner of Market Street and the King's Road. Its windows glowed with warm yellow light that promised shelter from the storm, though Zara knew from experience that warmth came at a price she could barely afford. She pushed through the heavy oak door, grateful to escape the rain even if only temporarily. "There's my favorite serving girl," called Brutus, the tavern keeper, his voice thick with sarcasm. He was a mountain of a man with graying hair and hands, like Ham Hocks, but his bark was worse than his bite mostly. "Table 6 needs their ale refilled, and someone's made a mess by the hearth again." Zara nodded silently and moved toward the kitchen to collect clean rags and a fresh pitcher. Her hands, once soft from a lifetime of royal privilege, were now rough with calluses and small cuts from her daily labor. The work was hard and the pay meager, but it kept her fed and gave her a roof over her head in the tavern's cramped servant quarters. As she emerged with the pitcher, she nearly collided with a tall stranger who had just entered. He was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair touched by premature silver at the temples and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His clothes were well made but practical, the garb of a successful merchant rather than nobility. "Forgiveness, miss," he said, steadying her elbow as ale sloshed dangerously in the pitcher. His voice carried a slight accent she couldn't place, cultured but warm. "I should watch where I'm walking. No harm done, sir," Zara replied, keeping her eyes down as she had learned to do. Former princesses who drew attention rarely found it to be the good kind. The stranger studied her face for a moment longer than was strictly polite, his brow furrowing slightly as if trying to recall something. Then he smiled and moved toward an empty table near the window. Zara went about her duties, refilling mugs and wiping tables, but she found herself glancing toward the newcomer more often than she should have. He ordered a simple meal and a room for the night, paying with silver coins that gleamed in the lamplight. Most travelers through Millbrook were either desperate refugees or rough traders heading for the frontier markets. This man was different, prosperous, but not ostentatious, observant, but not suspicious. "You're staring at the merchant," whispered Rosie, the other serving girl, as she passed Zara in the kitchen doorway. "Careful, love. That one's got eyes like he sees everything." Zara forced herself to focus on her work, but as the evening wore on, she noticed the stranger watching her as well, not in the leering way some men did, but with a thoughtful curiosity that made her uncomfortable. When she brought him his evening meal, thick stew, fresh bread, and local cheese, he gestured for her to stay. "What's your name, miss?" he asked, quietly, his voice pitched so only she could hear. "The name's Anna, sir," she lied smoothly. It was the identity she had crafted for herself, simple and unremarkable. Anna. He tested the name as if tasting wine. "You speak very well for a tavern girl, Anna. Your education shows." Heat rose in Zara's cheeks. despite her efforts to blend in. Traces of her royal upbringing still surfaced: her posture, her vocabulary, the way she unconsciously held herself. "I had a good teacher once," she said carefully. "I'm sure you did." The stranger, she realized she still didn't know his name, took a sip of ale and continued studying her. "Tell me, Anna, what do you know of trade routes through the eastern marches?" The question caught her off guard. "Sir, I deal in luxury goods," he explained. "Silks from the far kingdoms, spices from the southern isles, crafted items from the mountain clans. But I'm always looking for new opportunities, new markets. Someone with your background might have insights I lack." Zara's mind raced. He was fishing for information, but why? Did he suspect who she really was? Or was this genuine business interest? "I'm just a serving girl, sir. I wouldn't know about such things." His smile was knowing but not unkind. Of course, forgive an old trader's curiosity. He reached into his coat and produced a small silk pouch, placing it on the table between them. "For exceptional service tonight." Zara stared at the pouch, knowing it contained more coins than she earned in a month at the tavern. "Sir, I couldn't." "You could and you will," he said firmly but gently. "Consider it an investment." "An investment in what?" "In potential." He stood and extended his hand. Finn Blackwater, trader in fine goods and seeker of opportunities. Despite every instinct screaming caution, Zara found herself taking his hand. His grip was warm and calloused, the hands of someone who worked for his living. "Anna," she said again, but the life felt heavier this time. "Well then, Anna," Finn said, his eyes twinkling with something that might have been mischief. "Would you be interested in discussing a business proposition?" "What kind of proposition?" "I need someone with intelligence, education, and the ability to move in different social circles. Someone who understands both the concerns of common folk and the motivations of those in power." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I believe you might be exactly what I'm looking for." Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. This had to be a trap. No one simply walked into a tavern and offered former princesses new careers. Yet something in Finn's manner suggested sincerity rather than deception. "What would this position involve?" she asked cautiously. "Travel, mostly, establishing trade relationships, negotiating with local leaders, ensuring my goods reach the right markets at fair prices." His expression grew more serious. "It can be dangerous work. The frontier territories aren't always welcoming to outsiders. But the compensation would be generous, and you'd be a partner rather than an employee." "A partner? Someone with your talents deserves better than scrubbing tavern floors," Finn said simply. "I've been watching you tonight. The way you carry yourself, how you speak to different customers, your awareness of everything happening around you. You're wasting your gifts here." Before Zara could respond, Brutus's voice boomed across the tavern. "Anna, table 3's been waiting for their bread for 10 minutes. Go," Finn said quietly. "Think about my offer. I'll be here through tomorrow evening if you decide you're interested in a different kind of life." For Zara tucked the silk pouch into her apron and hurried away, her mind spinning. For the rest of the evening, she moved through her duties mechanically while wrestling with impossible questions. Could she trust this stranger? Was his offer genuine? Or was she walking into something far more dangerous than tavern work? As she finally made her way to her small room under the eaves, exhaustion warred with hope in her chest. For the first time since her exile, someone had looked at her and seen potential, rather than shame. Whether that was blessing or curse remained to be seen. Outside her tiny window, the rain continued to fall, washing the old world away and perhaps preparing the ground for something entirely new. Dawn broke clear and crisp over the rolling hills beyond Millbrook. As Zara finished loading the last of Finn's trade goods into his sturdy wagon, 2 months had passed since she accepted his partnership, and the rhythm of life on the road had become as natural as breathing. The silk pouch he'd given her that first night had purchased proper traveling clothes, sturdy boots, and a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since leaving the palace. "Ready for Thornfield?" Finn asked, swinging up onto the driver's bench with practiced ease. His dark hair caught the morning light, and Zara noticed the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, something she'd been noticing more Often lately. As ready as one can be for a town that reportedly hasn't seen a decent trade caravan in 3 years. Zara replied, settling beside him on the bench. She'd grown comfortable with their easy banter. The way conversation flowed between them like a familiar dance. The wagon wheels began their steady rhythm on the packed earth road, and Zara found herself studying Finn's profile as he guided their horses through the morning countryside. He'd been nothing but professional and respectful since their partnership began, but she'd caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite read. More troubling, she'd found herself watching him just as intently. "Tell me about Thornfield again," she said, forcing her attention back to business. Mining town, mostly copper and some silver. Used to be prosperous until the main vein played out about 5 years ago. Finn's voice took on the focused tone he used when discussing trade matters. "The people are proud but desperate. They've been selling their family heirlooms and working smaller claims just to survive. And you think there's opportunity there? I think there are people there who deserve better than slow starvation." His jaw tightened slightly. Sometimes good business and doing right by folks happened to be the same thing. This was what Zara had come to love about traveling with Finn, his ability to see profit and compassion as partners rather than enemies. In the palace, she'd been surrounded by advisors who spoke of the common people as abstractions, numbers on ledgers to be managed. Finn spoke of them as if they mattered, as if their struggles and dreams were worth his time and effort. They crested a hill near midday, and Thornfield spread below them like a tired old woman who'd once been beautiful. The houses were well built but weathered, the main street wide enough for the mining wagons that no longer came. A few people moved through the streets with the careful efficiency of those who couldn't afford wasted motion. "What's our strategy?" Zara asked, noting the suspicious looks their wagon was already drawing. "Honesty, mostly." Finn grinned at her. Surprised expression. "I know, revolutionary concept for a trader, but I've found people respond better when you're straight with them about your intentions." They pulled up outside the Silver Bell Inn, and within minutes a small crowd had gathered. Zara recognized the mixture of hope and wariness in their faces, the same expression she'd seen on refugees who'd fled to the capital during border disputes. "Good people of Thornfield," Finn called out, standing in his wagon with natural authority. "I'm Finn Blackwater, and this is my partner Anna. We're traders looking to establish regular business relationships with communities that have been overlooked by the larger merchant houses." An elderly man with silver hair and skeptical eyes stepped forward. "We ain't got much to trade." "Stranger, time's been hard since the main mine closed. I'm not here for your copper," Finn replied, hopping down from the wagon. "I'm here for your craftsmanship, your knowledge, your ingenuity. From what I've heard, Thornfield miners are among the best metal workers in the realm. That skill doesn't disappear just because one mine runs dry." Zara watched the crowd's faces shift from suspicion to curiosity. This was Finn's gift, the ability to see value where others saw only problems. She climbed down from the wagon and began untying the canvas covers from their goods. "We've brought samples," she announced, letting her voice carry the authority she'd learned in palace presentation chambers. "Fine fabrics, rare spices, quality tools, but more importantly, we've brought ideas." Over the next hour, Finn and Zara laid out their proposal. They would provide raw materials and market connections for Thornfield's craftspeople to create luxury items, jewelry, decorative metalwork, specialized tools. In return, they would handle the transportation and sale of goods to wealthy customers in the larger cities. "It's a fair offer," admitted Marta, a middle-aged woman whose hands bore the stains of metalworking. "But what guarantee do we have you won't disappear with our goods and leave us worse off than before?" Zara and Finn exchanged glances. This was the moment they'd anticipated, the test of whether their partnership could truly work. "I'll stay," Zara said, the words coming out before she'd consciously decided to speak them. "While Finn travels to arrange sales and gather materials, I'll remain here to coordinate production and ensure everyone's treated fairly." Surprise flickered across Finn's features, followed quickly by something that might have been admiration. They hadn't discussed this arrangement, but she could see him recognizing the wisdom of it immediately. "Anna's right," he said, his voice warm with approval. This only works if we're all invested in each other's success. Having a permanent representative here shows our commitment." The crowd murmured among themselves, and Zara could see the tide turning. These people had been abandoned by outside interests too many times to trust easily. But the offer of genuine partnership was something different. "We'll need to discuss it among ourselves," the silver-haired spokesman said finally. "Can you give us until tomorrow?" "Take all the time you need," Finn replied. "We'll be at the inn if you have questions." That evening, as they shared dinner, in the inn's common room, Zara found herself studying Finn's face by candlelight. The day's negotiations had revealed new facets of his personality. His genuine concern for the townspeople, his quick thinking when adjustments to their proposal were needed, his complete trust in her judgment when she'd committed to staying. "Thank you," he said quietly, his fingers brushing hers as he reached for his ale, "for the offer to stay. I hadn't thought of it, but it's exactly what they needed to hear." "It made sense," Zara replied, hyper-aware of the warmth where his skin had touched hers. "They need to know we see them as partners, not just sources of goods. Is that the only reason?" His brown eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. The question hung between them like a bridge neither quite dared to cross. Zara realized that somewhere in their weeks of travel, shared meals, and late-night planning sessions, her feelings for Finn had shifted from professional respect to something far more dangerous. "No," she admitted softly, "it's not the only reason." Finn's smile was gentle but tinged with something that might have been longing. "And whatever your real name is, you know I care about you as more than a business partner." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "My real name is Zara," she whispered, offering him the first completely honest thing she'd shared since that night in Millbrook. "Zara," he said it like a prayer, "it suits you better than Anna ever did." Before either could lose courage, he leaned across the small table and kissed her. It was gentle and questioning at first, then deeper as she responded with weeks of suppressed longing. When they finally broke apart, Zara felt as if the world had shifted on its axis. "The townspeople will expect an answer from us tomorrow," Finn said, his voice slightly rough. "Then we'd better make sure we're ready to give them one," Zara replied. Her hand finding his across the table. Outside the inn, Thornfield settled into sleep around them. But inside the flickering candlelight, two hearts that had found their home in each other planned a future that neither could have imagined alone. 6 months had transformed Thornfield from a dying mining town into a thriving center of craftsmanship and trade. Zara stood in the workshop that had once been an abandoned warehouse, watching Marta put the finishing touches on an intricate silver bracelet inlaid with local gemstones. The piece would fetch a handsome price in the capital markets, but more importantly, it represented hope made tangible. "Another order from the northern duchies," Finn announced, entering with a leather satchel full of correspondence. His face bore the satisfied expression of a man whose gambles had paid off handsomely. "Duchess Helena specifically requested a matching set of the moonstone jewelry we sent last month." Zara smiled, though her attention was drawn to a figure hovering near the workshop entrance, a young man in travel-stained clothes who'd been asking questions around town for the past 2 days. Something about his manner set her instincts on edge. "Finn," she said quietly, nodding toward the stranger, "we may have company." The young man stepped forward, his hand raised in a gesture of peace. He was perhaps 25, with the lean build of someone accustomed to hard travel and eyes that held an intensity that reminded Zara uncomfortably of her younger self. "Forgive the intrusion," he said, his voice carrying the accent of the eastern provinces. "I'm looking for the woman they call the Merchant Queen, the one who's been helping forgotten towns find their prosperity again." Zara's blood chilled. That title had begun appearing in letters and conversations over the past month. Stories of her work with Finn had spread far beyond their intended reach. "I'm afraid you're mistaken, friend. There's no queen here, merchant or otherwise." The stranger's smile was knowing. "Perhaps not a queen by birth, but certainly by deed. Word has spread, my lady, of communities lifted from despair, of fair trade, replacing exploitation, of a woman who treats commoners as if their lives have value. What do you want?" Finn stepped closer to Zara, his hand resting casually on the knife at his belt. The easy warmth that usually characterized his manner had vanished, replaced by the alertness of someone who'd survived dangerous situations. "Before, my name is Jorik Ironhand," the young man replied, pulling back his cloak to reveal a pendant bearing the symbol of a broken crown. "I speak for those who believe the Southern realms deserve better leadership than they currently enjoy." Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. The broken crown was the symbol of the rebellion that had been growing in the eastern provinces, a movement that sought to overthrow the established nobility and create a more equitable society. Her mother's letters, when they reached her through carefully maintained networks, spoke of increasing unrest and the crown's concern about organized resistance. "That's seditious talk, friend," Finn said carefully, "the kind that gets people hanged." "Only if the current regime maintains power," Jorik replied, "which is why I'm here." His eyes fixed on Zara with uncomfortable intensity. "The people speak of you as someone who sees beyond class and station, who judges by character rather than bloodline. They say you treat a blacksmith's concerns with the same respect you give a duke's, because a blacksmith's concerns often matter more than a duke's," Zara said before she could stop herself. Finn shot her a warning look, but the words were already spoken. Jorik's expression brightened. "Exactly. That's why we need you." "Need me for what?" "To lead us." The words hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. "The rebellion grows stronger each day, but we lack a unifying figure, someone the people trust, who understands both governance and the struggles of common folk." Zara felt as if the ground beneath her feet had turned to quicksand. "You're asking me to commit treason against the crown. I'm asking you to save your people from a system that values political convenience over human dignity." Jorik corrected. "How many communities like Thornfield have been abandoned by the nobility? How many people suffer in silence while the court plays its games of alliance and marriage?" The accusation hit closer to home than Zara cared to admit. Her exile had opened her eyes to realities she'd never fully grasped from within the palace. Walls, the suffering was real, the neglect systematic, and the current system seemed designed to perpetuate rather than solve these problems. "This is madness," Finn interjected. "You're talking about civil war. The bloodshed has already begun," Jorik said grimly. "Tax collectors murdered in the eastern villages. Granaries burned rather than surrendered to noble houses that hoard, while others starve. The question isn't whether there will be conflict, but whether it will be organized resistance or chaotic violence." A new voice spoke from the workshop doorway. "He speaks truth, though I wish he didn't." They turned to see Mira, a traveling healer who'd arrived in Thornfield 3 days earlier. She was a woman of perhaps 40 years, with graying brown hair, and hands gentle enough to comfort the dying or firm enough to set broken bones. Her presence had been a blessing to the town, but now Zara wondered if her arrival had been as coincidental as it seemed. "Mira," Zara's voice held a question and a demand. "I came here to meet you," the healer admitted, stepping fully into the workshop, "to see if the stories were true, if there really was someone who could bridge the gap between noble birth and common wisdom." "You're with them," Finn stated. It wasn't a question. "I'm with the people who are dying because their voices don't matter to those in power." Mira replied, "I've seen too many children wasted by hunger while grain rots in noble warehouses. Too many families destroyed by taxes levied to fund wars that serve only to maintain the current balance of power." Zara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices settling on her shoulders. The life she'd built with Finn was everything she'd never known she wanted: purposeful work, genuine partnership, love that grew stronger with each shared challenge. But the specter of her past, her responsibilities, and her potential future loomed like storm clouds on the horizon. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" she said finally. "Return to the capital," Jorik said. "Not as an exile seeking forgiveness, but as a leader demanding change. The people know your name now, know what you've accomplished. They'll follow you, and if I refuse, then the rebellion continues without you," Mira said sadly. "But it will be bloodier, more chaotic, and likely to fail, which means more suffering for the very people you've been helping." Finn's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with a desperation that spoke of hard choices ahead. "Zara, whatever you decide, I'm with you. But remember that changing the world and being happy aren't mutually exclusive goals. She looked around the workshop at the evidence of what they'd built together. Not just successful trade relationships, but genuine community. Marta and her fellow craftspeople had reclaimed their dignity along with their prosperity. Children who'd grown thin with hunger now laughed as they played in streets busy with commerce. And hope. I need time to think, Zara said finally. And I need to discuss this with Finn privately, Jorok nodded. We'll be at the Copper Kettle Inn until tomorrow evening. After that, he shrugged. The rebellion moves forward, with or without the merchant queen. As the strangers departed, Zara found herself staring at her reflection in the polished surface of one of Marta's mirrors. The face looking back was no longer that of the sheltered princess, who'd been exiled in shame. This woman bore the marks of honest work, carried herself with earned confidence, and had eyes that held both compassion and steel. What are you thinking? Finn asked softly. I'm thinking, Zara replied, that sometimes the crown finds you whether you want it or not. Outside, the sun was setting over Thornfield, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow would bring decisions that could reshape a kingdom. But tonight there was still time for the woman she'd become to hold the man she loved and pretend the world's weight wasn't settling on her shoulders.